Hi, friends. Welcome back to another Ask Augustine vlog. And today I am going to have a special guest, my one and only brand manager from the Midwifery Wisdom Collective. I'm so excited that Kristen's going to join us today. So if you're just tuning in, where are you tuning in from? What do you want to talk about today? We've gotten some questions and we're going to try to answer them today. The main question that I have heard is what do I do when I'm a new midwife? What is my first step? I have all these concerns about clinical and business and finances and colleagues and peer review and continuing ed units that are still not needed for several years. New midwives have lots of worries. So today we're going to try to dig in and answer a few of them. So, hey, if I know you, tell me, hey, where you're from. If I don't know you, especially tell me where you're from. And we're going to have a fun chat today. I'm so happy to be supporting midwives all over the country. I've had a bunch of consults this week, so just sending some love. In fact, I'd kind of invite everyone to just take a moment and just send some love out into the universe for those midwives that are struggling right now. It's one of the most challenging professions, and we don't get enough support. We don't get enough love, and it can be really challenging. And there's some midwives that are really hurting. So send them some love. Today on this Facebook Live, we are inviting Kristen to join. So I'm so excited. Hopefully she will come on the call and we'll get to do that split screen thing and talk about some of the questions received. So let's see. There she is.
Hello.
Hi, friend. Still a little. It looks like
Wi-Fi.
your Wi-Fi is
Okay,
catching up.
Second.
I'm glad you're here. For everyone who's tuning in, let's see where you're tuning in from. We've got Susanna from rural Pennsylvania. That's very cool. Jade is here from Phoenix, Arizona. Hi, friends. Great to see you. Today we are chatting about becoming a midwife and about the challenges and the worries and the questions. We also have kind of a backlog of Ask Augustine questions that we're going to get. So if you don't know about this and you have questions you'd like to ask us, just drop it in the notes section. My admin are paying attention and we're going to get those to the screen. And of course, you can also always message or DM me any questions you have. And if you want them to be anonymous, that's fine. We don't mind. We can answer anonymous questions. So I do these posts pretty weekly, and then they go up on my YouTube channel too. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please do. We have some fun things happening there. And we are also very close to 1,000 subscribers. And at that point, we're going to be giving a free giveaway. And let's just say it's going to be really cool. So I want you to go subscribe, get in the drawing, and then get caught up on all the things we produce. So Help for Mothers, we have a new episode coming out next week. That's the podcast focused on the maternal health crisis for mamas and midwives. And then a Midwifery podcast is coming back with our first episode, which is going to be a COVID episode, which is going to be really interesting. We're going to hear from midwives all over the world. And here we are. We got Kristen back. Hopefully it's working. Okay.
I turned my Wi-Fi
off. You
sound
so
great,
I am on. But the picture's still fuzzy, but
yeah,
you sound great. So hopefully it'll catch up. There, it's catching up. I'm seeing more of you. Yes, I see your eyeballs. Yeah. Yes.
Am I here?
Friend.
Am I coming?
Will you introduce yourself?
That's good. Hi, how are you? Yeah, so I'm Kristen Mantell. I have a company, Wild World Mama. We do support for the people who are in the business of improving pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, mainly branding and website stuff. And so I had the awesome opportunity to jump on the Midwifery Wisdom Collective team to help with some of the branding and
awesome
social media and stuff like that. So I figured we'd jump on and we'd ask questions.
Let's do it. So the
Yeah.
first question that I was sort of tackling was, what do I
Okay.
do when I'm a new midwife? Like, what is next? And we hear that a lot, don't we? Like, we get that kind of consult all the time. And
Yeah.
we have just created a really
For
fun
sure.
resource. It's called Start a Midwifery Business Right. So that's out there in the interworlds, interwebs. And it's an online course. So it's proceed at your own pace. There's no requirement for schedule for changing or anything like that. It's totally do it your own way. And it is pretty affordable. It's about 18 hours of content, 16, 18 hours of content. And we have
Yeah.
some video. We're adding
Yeah.
audio, but there's a lot of worksheets and then, of course, all the course content. So if you're a new midwife, if you're a student planning to open a practice and you want the business know-how, that's a great resource. But we have a bunch of other resources. And so I thought, where
Yeah.
should we start about thinking like this new midwife thing?
Well, let's
Yeah,
see. Well, like yeah, well, as a new midwife, right? Because that start a midwifery business right course is
right.
really focused on like the business, like that core foundational stuff that, I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know,
Well, we
where do you
did
get
some
that?
research. Yeah,
You
but you
learn how to
don't get the
become a
business stuff.
midwife,
Yeah, so you could
like
hire
a
like a
clinical
business
side, but
coach and you could
yeah,
hire an accountant or a lawyer, um, but they wouldn't know midwifery. And so this is what we're offering is
yeah,
this really unique perspective is,
no,
I've owned a lot of midwifery businesses and I've coached a lot of midwives around the world and specifically in the US to become successful in their business. And
hmm
we put it all together. We put all the content in the same place.
yeah,
And I think we're getting some really
yeah,
great reviews, which is fun to see people being like, oh, that's where it is. I was looking. Yeah. And we're doing
yeah,
one
yeah,
live call for
yeah,
this
for sure.
on the 17th. So if you want to get in on this, yeah, it's in a few days.
hmm So what is
So
that in
if
a
you
few
want to
days?
get in on this,
Is that?
definitely consider that.
Yeah.
But there's some other resources that I always like to highlight for new midwives. And probably one of the most important resources, given the history of midwifery, which has been, let's face it, like fairly martyrdom. Like midwives in the US have kind of walked around thinking, I have to die on the cross of midwifery. Like this can't
hmm
be sustainable, you know? And I disagree
Yeah.
so entirely. Like I completely
Yeah.
disagree with
Yeah.
that premise. And one of the most
hmm
powerful resources to
Yeah.
help me become knowledgeable of a new paradigm would be Brene Brown. And she's not at all midwifery related, but she's this shame vulnerability researcher, social worker in Texas. And if you haven't discovered her yet, you're really living under a rock because she's become a guru of our times. Her TED
Yeah.
Talks, she's got a Netflix
Yeah.
special,
Yeah. Google
books,
that.
podcasts, all the things. And one of the offerings that she has is her Dare to
hmm
Lead seminars. And so, in becoming educated in her paradigm shifting way that we work with trust in the workplace and actually trust within ourselves has just been really transformational for me. So, I highly recommend midwives
hmm
clue into her work and really treat her as she is, like a guru. And I include some of her content
hmm
in my Birth Business Club Masterclass. And we only offer that once a year. And that comes out in February. So if you are trying to put all the pieces together of like a business, a practice, what about boundary setting? What about self-care? What about balance? How do I make money in this
Yeah.
profession? All those questions,
All of
we
it.
go through that intensively. It's a 6-week online course. We have over 45 modules in that
Yeah.
course. It's really intense. And it's robust, that's the word, and it
It's
answers
robust.
all those questions. So put that in your
It's robust.
calendars
It's
too.
good.
We launch February
hmm
1st, but in the meantime there's lots of content out there with Brene that you can tag and use and listen to, and it's a huge resource.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you
exactly.
just look up like quotes on the
Exactly.
internet, right? She'll come up.
The best.
She's got the
She's like
best
a
quotes.
walking
Yeah.
talking tweetable machine. She's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
She is.
Well, so
She is.
yeah,
Yeah.
Brene has been
It's a good one.
hugely influential in me and my work, and I hope it is in your all work. And her book, Daring to Lead, is just is great. She uses that braving acronym Braving, to give basically the anatomy of trust. And I think one of the hallmarks of midwifery care is that we really trust ourselves. And there's so much distrust in midwifery in the birth world between obstetricians and midwives, and even between midwives, that it's almost like we've kind of forgotten this bit. And this piece brings us home, brings us back to remembering that. And also, if you have Netflix, which basically 100% of people do, I highly recommend her Netflix special. It's just brilliant. It's beautiful. It's accessible. She's like a comedy star, but for personal growth. It's so cool. So really love that. And those are free and accessible resources that can make a big difference. The main work of being a new midwife is really boundary setting. It's understanding where your limits are, and then making an arrangement with yourself that you won't cross them. Because crossing those boundaries is really the recipe for disaster. And when I get consults from midwives around the country who are struggling or have a request for medical records because they're being investigated, or there's some kind of real crisis going on in their lives, it almost always boils down that they crossed their own boundaries. They ignored their own intuition. They didn't listen to that gut feeling that told them, this is not right. This is not the right client. We should do something different. Yeah. It's huge. Yeah. It's huge. It changes everything.
That's huge.
When you really cultivate that internal language. So, boundary setting is one of the intangible early roles or early jobs of becoming a midwife. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things, right? You start out becoming a midwife. I am not a midwife myself, but you start out, and then there's all these little nuances, right? That intuition piece that's like, listen, like, if that client, you walk into that and it just doesn't feel right, that you need to listen to that.
It is.
It's with a lot of professions.
It is, but it's like life and death actually with midwifery.
But it's just to...
Yeah.
For sure. So, but that, I think that's one thing about, when I first had jumped on the team of Midwifery Wisdom, that, looking at the courses and the course content, and then realizing like the amount of information that you need to know, right? That you learn along the way, but nobody really teaches you. And midwifery really is one of those things that, like, professions where you learn the best, right? By hands-on, by doing, by learning from the people who have done it.
Well, and you can't,
rather than just reading it in the book.
Parts of midwifery that you actually cannot comprehend by just reading alone. You must actually experience. And then, of course, because 90+% of midwives who are independent and community-based in the US are also entrepreneurs, there's like this whole other part, which is learning how to run a business, and taxes and legal status and building codes, and like, it's exhausting, right? I'm oftentimes quoted as saying, midwifery is the hardest job on the planet. And I think I'm right. I've done this before in a workshop where I've had like a big whiteboard and some dry erase, and I'll be like, so tell me what job descriptions you do besides midwifery. And so they're like, phlebotomist and, nursery nurse and respiratory therapist, and janitor. And then the list starts going, billing, coding, advertising executive, and it goes on and on. And
we paid $1 million
we got to over 70 job titles that are encompassed within the midwifery definition. And that's insane, right? There's no other job on the planet that has the broadest and most extreme scope of knowledge, and then also is life and death every day. I mean, it's like crazy, right? It's crazy.
Totally. Yeah. Well, but that's, like you had mentioned, it's just the boundary setting and like burnout.
Burnout is
how
huge.
do you do 70 jobs and have the extra emotional,
and we haven't even
the
brought
life and
in
death aspect
the
of
persecution from the mainstream medical world that's trying to take us all down every day. Yeah, it's extreme. And like you said, burnout is real.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the ways to
Yeah.
combat the crisis of burnout, and I bet if you all evaluate it, there are many senior midwives, even good junior midwives, that have left the profession as a result of this extreme amount of stress and burnout.
Yeah.
And one of the best ways to
Yeah.
combat that is to actually get really clear in yourself about your boundaries, what you're willing to do, what you're not willing to do, what is acceptable. And then to paint those lines so clearly that even in the midst of a crisis and sleep deprivation, you won't cross them. Yep. And that's what we do in the masterclass in February.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even beyond that, right? So when in any kind of profession, right, we specifically, right, midwifery, there is like a cap, to how many clients you can take and all that. So you need to make sure that you also have the mindset of, right?
So this is the other thing, right? Like
so
one of the ways to counter burnout is actually to make not just like survive, but to thrive in the profession. And so we're taking this challenge on as well. We're right in the middle of a new course called Marketing for Midwives. And it is really about the streamlined sort of plug and play method to have repeat customers and to get really your ideal client in the door. So that's going to be really fun. That comes up in just a couple of weeks. That's going to be really great. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Soon. Yeah. So that's a really important aspect, right? With birth workers, is just the marketing.
I know they don't teach that either.
Another thing they don't teach, right?
Yep. So marketing is not a part of midwifery school generally. We are making it a part of the Midwifery Wisdom School, so you can check that out. And then in the fall, we have How Midwives Make Money, which is the whole strategic planning, accounting bit that also is no accounting taught in midwifery school. So we're gonna teach that, and then we have our defensive charting course will come back again in the fall, and that's been getting some pretty incredible reviews. I don't know if have you been getting those? Do you see them? I think Anna's been getting them. They're some of the exit surveys of people who've been taking the defensive charting class have just been really astounding. And in fact, I got a message today from one of the graduates of that class who was like, well, perfect timing. I just got my first subpoena today. And I was like, oh, they're so in it. I'm so glad that they know what to look for and that they can, hopefully turn out charts that are really speaking the legalese, the medicalese, the kind of language that is defensive. It protects you. So we teach that in the defensive charting seminar. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, why don't you talk about, what, in terms of defensive charting, like, what does that mean? Like, why is that even important, specifically for midwives who don't practice within,
the chart, the medical chart that you create during the course of care is actually a standalone entity. If it's completed within a reasonable time of the event, either the prenatal or the birth or whatever, then it's considered a legal document separate from you. And so when there is some kind of, prosecution of some kind, you are being accused of something or being investigated for something. If you have completed the chart and it is, authenticated and signed, it will be subpoenaed. It will be a part of the investigation. And hopefully you've charted in such a way that it actually is protective. It is defensive for you. And so that's what we teach. Unfortunately, in midwifery, there's also very little medical charting training. I know some of the schools are teaching it, but in general, midwifery is like, if we go back the lineage of midwifery, it's kind of a handed down, reinvented profession, because we lost midwifery as a result of the really aggressive American Medical Association campaigns against midwives in the early turn of the last century. And so different parts of the country lost it at different times and regained it at different times. But when it came back, midwifery mostly came back through nursing or through, just discovery. Right. So Rahima Baldwin Dancy and Ina May Gaskin and Nancy Weiner Cohen and some of these authors that were around in the 60s and 70s outlined some of that return to midwifery practice in the U.S. And many of them got their skills from a nursing path. And the interesting thing is that nursing, by definition in the United
Right.
States, is a subservient practice. They are learning to take orders from their attending physician. And so when you think from that perspective, you don't chart as the primary provider. And so there are many midwives in the US who are keeping lots of
That's
notes
interesting.
about all the things that are happening, but they're not actually defensively
Right.
charting. They don't look like the
Right.
provider. So then these cases that go through around the US,
Right.
claiming practicing medicine without a license can go through because the actual legal document, the chart, doesn't demonstrate that there was ever a provider in the room. And it's simply a charting style. They did all the things, but they just didn't chart in the way that we understand as medicalese or legalese in the US. So I've created this 12-hour online charting course. We're going to launch it again in October. And that's another huge benefit for new midwives, to get that knowledge so that they can really start their practice protecting themselves legally. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Well, yeah, like you had mentioned, just even the current environment, right? Even 2020, midwives are being persecuted. It's just crazy. So it's important.
I know several
to know
midwives that are,
know.
they really need access to midwives, but
midwives,
unfortunately
and
there are no more midwives in jail
attacked.
Right, and that's just mind blowing. There's no midwife on the planet that is intending harm.
Not okay.
It's, it's crazy. Anyway, we have some questions today. Do you have them in front of you, or should I look them up?
Yeah, I'll grab them. Let's see.
Hi, friends. We have some people tuning in. Joanna's here from DC. Yi is here from Hawaii. Cami is here from Hawaii. Carmela is here from Haiti. Hey, Carmela. I see Lucy. Lucy's here in Australia. Angie's here from Dallas, Texas. What fun. Hey, friends. Barbara's here from Tennessee. Janice from Hawaii. Corey from Oregon. Wow, it's a great group. Hi, friends. Just tuning in. Tell me where you're from. I love to see that connection. That's always great. And we're answering a few questions today. Crystal's from Arizona. Hey, Crystal. Cassie's here. Hey, there's some good friends here. So we're going to answer a few questions today we've been getting.
All right. Yes.
And, okay, let's go.
All right, let's see. Okay. All right, I'll go. So let's see. This is from, I think, Bethany. I have a question about risk assessment when it comes to a history of cesarean. And you're assessing whether the person is in a good out-of-hospital birth candidate. Let's see. So I remember us talking about this during one of the case studies, but wanted your thoughts from you. Would you rule out someone if they had an infection in labor, like choreo, but resolved with...
Yeah, Angie, the Netflix... Yeah, okay.
Antibiotics.
Just answering Angie's question right now. She's asking, it's Brene Brown, Brene with an accent, and then Brown. It's on Netflix. It's on YouTube. But there are TED Talks. There's books. Just look it all up. So we got this question from Bethany, I think you said, and it is a question about risk assessment with VBAC. And that's a great question. So if your state laws don't, restrict you from attending VBAC, and you're having to do risk assessment on your own to figure out if this client is appropriate for out-of-hospital care, there's a few kind of lines in the sand that I feel are evidence-based, and they come out of the NIH study. The National Institutes for Health did a VBAC study in 2010, I believe, and they gave some really clear guidelines based on a retroactive multi-study review of the safety of VBAC in facilities. So even though we're talking about community-based out of facilities, I think we should be as conservative or even more conservative because we have the time difference. So the National Institutes for Health VBAC study of 2010, their final recommendation was that from decision to incision should be 75 minutes or less. So that gave a lot of midwives a lot of confidence that birthing out of the hospital with VBACs was a very appropriate thing, but we just needed to be within a transport radius and cognizant of how long that hospital's intake process is. Like, do they make women go through the ER? Do they accept them right into OB? Like all those things. So knowing the protocols of your local hospital and how far from the hospital, it can be very appropriate, very safe to do community-based feedback. If you understand a few risk factors I'm going to talk about in a second, and then you think about this time difference. So time is the first one. And the first part of time is how far from services. And that 75 from decision to incision means that we have 15, 20 minutes of transport. So that backs us up to about 55 minutes. And then we maybe have a 15-minute onboarding process in the hospital, which backs us all the way up to about 30 minutes. So the furthest, I would be from a hospital is probably 20 or 30 minutes for a VBAC because of all the steps along the way, getting the person out of their house and into their car, driving to the facility, getting all the way through the facility, all the way up to where that physician can make a decision, et cetera, et cetera. If you live in a very hostile area where physicians don't take your word for it and they practice punitive care where they make people sit in ERs instead of evaluating them right away when they're in labor, those kinds of things, it can be less and less safe. The other part of time is time from the last surgery. So their study and a few others have corroborated that the shortest time frame between the last surgery and this attempted delivery should be 17 months is the shortest time frame. So I always look for space between babies.
Okay.
And then the type of incision is another piece where it is a low transverse, or if it had an extension, a T extension or a J extension. Certainly we have decided that classical incision is a contraindication. And I would add those extension surgeries as also a contraindication. It's very disappointing for those few women that do have that random scar. But I think the risk of rupture is greater in the literature when we don't have simply a low transverse. And then the next piece that she was asking about is infection. And I think this one is a little more tricky. It's a little more gray area. But I would say that a postpartum infection is a contraindication for a safe out-of-hospital VBAC. But an intrapartum infection, like a simple chorioamnitis that caused some fetal distress, which was the reason for the infection, and then the antibiotics on board during the surgery and after the surgery put it in control, and there was no wound weeping or wound reopening or any kind of postoperative issue, I think that actually does not show increased risk in the literature, but I would have to go back and look. That's not really prevalent in my mind right now. To me, the thing that is really clear is the post-operative infection. So if she has drainage tubes in, or if she had to go back in, that to me is like the scar tissue is so much greater, and the wound, the actually integrity of the healing will be decreased because of that post-op infection. But pre-op, like the reason for the cesarean is because they suspected chorioamnitis. I don't think that risks anyone out. So hopefully that helps you. So time, distance, and space between babies and infection are the kind of gold standard evaluating pieces for me for VBAC.
Oh, that was good. That was good. Let me see. There was a little bit more to this, but let's see.
Cool.
Yeah, that was basically, I covered that really well. Let's see. So this is from Caroline. I would love to see some study of pelvic dimensions along with fetal skull landmark explained. I have the hardest time with the wording. There has got to be a simpler way.
Yeah, it is. I've said this when I teach my workshops all the time. Being good at doing a fetal position assessment pre and in labor, like pregnancy and labor, is really an advanced midwifery skill. And it's tossed around like somehow it should be really easy, and it's not easy. It's not. And this one is really not easy. And I would say after years and years of teaching students and also doing these trainings and talking to midwives, it's my firm understanding that you don't get good at fetal position assessment in labor until you do 100 births past licensure. So if you're a new midwife, you're not great at this. Just
Yeah.
like get clear on that. You're not great at this.
Yeah.
And
No
honestly, you
pressure.
can't
It's
be.
okay. Yeah.
The level of
Yeah.
dexterity and sensitivity that you need
Mm-hmm.
to get really good at feeling the fetal landmarks in relation to the maternal pelvic structures is high level work. We're doing this in the dark, by feel, on a woman who's in pain, behind a cervix, with about 80,000 different position combos. I mean, it's like, it's high level. It's really challenging.
Yeah.
So the first thing I would say for new midwives is just give yourself a break. You're not great at this. You're not going to be great at this. Don't pretend you're an expert. It's okay to not know. This is a reason to bring senior midwives with you, to consult with senior midwives, to get that learning curve. It's also a reason, and this is a very controversial phrase, but I'm going to say it anyway because, I like to be controversial. It's also a reason to check your mamas. And we have had this super hands-off reality in midwifery for decades now. But what has it gained us? There are lots of women with long dysfunctional labors that don't know it's dysfunctional. And there are lots of midwives who don't actually have the skill to evaluate the dysfunction because they're not checking. And I think there's no real benefit there. So if everything's hunky-dory and like her labor is escalating and her pain response is escalating and her contractions are getting stronger and closer together, fine, be hands-off. But if you're in a labor plateau and you're doing the same thing for a number of hours, who are you helping by not checking? Not the mom. She doesn't want to do more hours of useless labor. Not you, because you have less information. And not the baby, because actually babies only can labor for a certain amount of time. We don't know what time that is. They want to be born, right? So almost always, I can say, like all the consults I get, almost always, if you have a plateau dysfunctional labor, it's either because of fear, empty the room, you've got the wrong people there, or it's a malpositioned baby.
Oh my goodness,
and malpositioned babies, given our sedentary lifestyle, frequently do not change on their own. Sometimes there's a really smart baby in there. Sometimes there's a super motivated mama, but most of the time, people are fairly pain avoidant. So that mama will be doing the things that cause the least amount of pain. And unfortunately, with malpositioned babies, that's oftentimes what does not move the baby. I know.
Man. I wish more moms knew that. I wish that was more common knowledge.
Well, but the problem is that most moms are seeing care providers that don't know how to change the position. The only solution they have is to cut the baby out.
And that is true.
Midwives are motivated in such a different way because we don't have the cesarean option without a lot of rigmarole, right? So if there's nobody in distress, baby's doing fine, mom's doing fine, we just have a labor plateau with a dysfunctional labor, then we can be motivated to have lots and lots of solutions. That's the whole premise behind spinning babies, right? There's like this massive website and all these trainings to try to understand how do we properly position a baby and how do we change a dysfunctional baby position. I teach a lot about this because I'm very motivated to help midwives have the tools to get us back onto the course of normal when we've found it abnormal. But one of the first tools, one of the first ways is to actually know what you're feeling. And it is really hard. So you can use the models. You can definitely study the books and all that sort of stuff. But like most things in midwifery, you got to do it. You got to do the exam to get good at the exam. So my recommendation, even for the moms that I work with now, even though I have this skill, for decades, is if you're a first-time mom, if you're a mom that has not given birth vaginally, I want to check when you're in labor. I want to see what's the starting point. So that later, if we have an arrest of progress, I can actually tell you if we've made any or not. I can tell you if this is prodromal labor. I can tell you if this baby's in a funky position early on, because it's much easier to turn a baby in early labor than advanced labor. So if we diagnose it sooner, we actually have less dysfunctional labors. So anyway, my advice overall is check your mamas. Yep.
Interesting.
But you've heard this too, right? The midwife hands off, like, less intervention.
Yeah. I think it's, one of those things that with anything, right? And I'm a big
Yep.
believer on be informed so you can make educated decisions about anything. But knowing
Yep.
that ahead of time, right? As a mom, if knowing that ahead of time, you know, the reason why I might need to check you is because this would help with like a
Yep.
prolonged labor, perhaps. It would give us more information,
Yep.
more tools. So knowing why we're doing it, which I think sometimes in, you know, typical type medical settings,
No.
there isn't really a reason why.
Yeah.
Like or at least we're not being told why. It's just, hey, this is what we
Yeah.
do. And so I think
Yeah.
it's important that
Yeah. Well, I mean, there should be a reason
you
for
know that,
everything
you
we
know,
do.
but
And
that,
that's my
yeah, that's
point, is that like hands off at all costs, sit
right.
on your hands, knit in the
Mm-hmm.
corner, midwifery module, like method that's been trained for the last couple decades doesn't actually help everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I understand, like it was a response to the over medicalization in the medical world. It was a response being like, that's way too much. We're not going to check you every hour. I totally agree with that. But it's like the pendulum has swung so far in the other
Right.
direction that we've missed the plot, as they say
Mm-hmm.
here in lost the plot, as they say here in Australia. It's like, it's a great saying, is it? We 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 went so far opposite from the medical world that we actually shot ourselves in the foot. We lost so
Mm-hmm.
much data that we aren't making actually informed decisions anymore. We're just like, well, you're in labor. We'll just see. Hopefully this labor
Yeah.
doesn't last 2 more days. And it's like, oh, there's so much more we could be doing with our skill if we just had a baseline understanding of what position that baby's in and what
Mm-hmm.
that cervix is doing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. I haven't, yeah, that's an awesome perspective. But yeah, I just can see that how, you know, because midwifery is one of those fields where
Yeah,
if you see a whole
you do.
gamut of stuff and you really through
Yep.
learning, through seeing,
Yep.
through doing,
Yep.
you learn how to do the
Yep.
stuff and to make that call. Hey, is this, you know, but that I think is important that you had mentioned that, you know, in terms of
You got to
understanding the
feel it.
pelvic
Yeah.
dimensions and the
Yeah.
yeah, that but that as new midwives
You just don't know it.
under 100
Yeah.
births,
It's okay. Bring a senior
it's
midwife.
okay. It's okay. Like don't,
Bring a
you know,
pelvis and doll. You know, one of the
yeah,
great tools I
yeah.
like
But
is it's called the fetal position model.com. And I think they even sell it on In His Hands, that birth supply store. Anyway, it's this like flexible plastic disc, and it has the model of the baby's head. We call it the fetal compass rose. It has the anterior fontanelle, the posterior fontanelle, the sagittal suture connecting it, like the landmarks that you would feel if you were checking. And then it has it with the
okay.
ROA, LOA, you know, OP. It has the different positions. And so basically you flip it until it matches what you're feeling on the inside.
Interesting.
And then number at the top, or the letter at the top, is the position. So it's a great learning tool. And it's called
Yeah.
fetalpositionmodel.com, I think. And it's a great tool for new midwives as well. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's kind of
There you
like
go.
practice. Yeah.
That's kind of like practice,
Yeah, you
right?
got to do it for real.
But you got to
So
do
I'm going
it
to catch
real,
up on
in a
some
real
questions
sense.
here on
Yeah.
the chat board. Catherine is asking when
Okay.
we're offering defensive charting again. That starts the
All
first
right.
Monday in October. And Lisa's saying, along with the position questioning, what do you think about babies starting on the right side and instead of the left? Yeah, I've seen that. I think it might just be chance, but it might also be having to do, like, I love this interprofessional thing we're getting into, working with physiotherapists and chiropractors and massage therapists, and really understanding the physiology of the maternal pregnant body. And I think that it has to do a little bit with pelvic tension. So the way that the organs are placed in the pelvis and the way that sort of the spiral, like the natural spiral of everything, most babies start on the left and rotate towards the pubic bone. So they rotate to the right. And I've seen some babies who start on the right and actually rotate left. And that's sort of like an interesting, I don't know, it'd be
You think they're
fascinating.
left-handed
Like,
when they come out?
one of the
No?
things that I've become aware of
Yeah,
here in
that's
Australia
funny.
is, you know, the rivers flow a different way. The toilet bowl spins a different way. We're in the Southern Hemisphere. It's real. When in the
That's real?
Southern Hemisphere, everything flows differently.
What?
And that,
That's so crazy.
yeah, it's real. And
I'd
so
heard that. I
it's,
didn't know that was
and
real.
also like, you know, when you think about directions, like to get warmer, you have to go north here. Yeah. If you go south, you hit ice, right? Because we're in the southern hemisphere. Anyway, yeah. So it's been such a trippy thing. But what happened is it really made me understand that actually with our whole world being not in a natural flow, if you will, like we're in this artificial world, it could be that the natural rhythm, the natural rotation of the biology of that mom-baby pair can be flowing the opposite direction. There could be this shift that is the same that we see on the planet. Like the planet has these different levels of shifts. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but the big round world is the big pregnant belly, in my opinion. And so I know. So like this centrifugal sort of movement, this spiral movement that we see, I think it absolutely could flow the different way. And I don't know, there's some midwives saying they're seeing more babies start on the right. But all babies, this is for those of you who are new checking, all babies enter the pelvis in the transverse. Whether they're L transverse or right transverse, doesn't matter. But all babies enter the pelvis in the transverse, and a little bit asynclitic because of the shape of the pelvic bowl. So the inlet of the pelvis is wider side to side than it is front to back. So all babies start facing one side or the other. And a lot of midwives are like, this baby's transverse, it's going to be stuck transverse. No, all babies start that way. It won't rotate to the anterior or the posterior until it's in the mid pelvis. So I think that's a good piece of knowledge everyone should know.
That's fascinating. Do you find that with, or maybe, I don't know, right, observing the ones that turn this way versus this way, like,
well, so the general midwifery sort of feeling is that babies who start on the right are more likely to rotate posterior because the general rotation of the maternal pelvis is from left to right. So if they start on the right and they keep rotating left, they'll end up in the posterior. But what I'm saying is, I don't think actually that's happening all the time. I think babies who start on the right are sometimes rotating the opposite direction, which is a whole study of biomechanics, which is like beyond the scope of this call. But yeah.
You dive really.
I have another theory, and that actually more babies end up on the left because there's more space there, because basically 100% of the Western world's right leg is actually more tense because the right leg is the driving leg. Because even in Australia, where we drive on the other side of the car, the gas pedal is still on the right. I've had quite the entertainment here.
Wait.
So think about the car. Brakes on the left.
That'll help your brain make more connections.
Gas is on the right, but you drive with your right leg, because we used to use the left leg for a clutch, right?
Right.
But which would make us balanced. Well, you didn't, but I did. Because I'm older. But that would make us balanced. But we don't have the clutch anymore in most cars, which means that we're right dominant.
That's so interesting.
In your legs, which means your pelvis is right dominant, which means there's more musculature and more tension, which means there's more space on the left, which is why most babies start on the left. That's my theory anyway. I don't know if it's true. This is a birth biomechanic brain. I want to investigate this more.
Well, yeah, but that's an interesting theory, right? Because I mean, our, like you had said, like sedentary lifestyles, like our lifestyle and the things
changes
that we do,
everything.
Things we consume mentally and into our mouths, it affects everything. So why wouldn't our physical habits day in and day out?
I have a bunch of chiropractor friends, and they're always lamenting about how the sitting and the driving changes the hip flexors on the right side of the body. And so I've extrapolated that into birth. I think it changes the birth thing, but anyway, it's all theory. We don't know.
Maybe Yeah, but
So,
yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting
Lisa's
though.
saying she's seeing it a lot
Oh, that's cool.
lately. Not arresting, just doing a bigger spin. Yeah. So sometimes they start on the right and they take what we call the long arc rotation. They start ROT and then go ROP and then go LOT and then end up OA. So it's like they do a 75% spin of the circle versus babies going LOA to OA, which is like 25% of the circle. And so, yeah, I think they could be doing a long arc rotation. You can tell if they did because of the ridge bone. The bones will be marked like that they came across the pubic bone. So you'll see that the anterior fontanelle will be smaller and the frontal bone will be dropped lower. So you'll see a ridge bone there. That means that they absolutely passed over the pubic bone. That'll show you that you had a long arc rotation. Yep.
That's got to be fascinating to be able to see all these different stories.
Yeah,
I teach a whole
workshop on that. People who've been to my classes will see me like slide after slide after slide of babies' heads being like, and what happened here? And what happened here? And you can absolutely recreate the path. It's really fun. In fact, when new moms want to understand what happened to them in labor, I always say, where's the earliest picture of your baby's head? And I can tell you what happened. It's really cool. Yeah. Tova's saying that she had a birth last night where a baby rotated from ROA to OA to LOA. Yeah, that's an example of the baby going the other direction, which is just really fascinating. Yeah, I mean, people say that this crisis we're in the world right now is some kind of upgrade, some kind of planetary evolutionary upgrade that people are like vibrating at a different level because we've had limbic resonance around the globe for the first time maybe ever, where everyone is thinking the same thing. And so it makes sense to me that, maybe we're spinning different ways. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe. Well, we'll find out. Time will tell, right? Augustine told us.
Lisa, that's I miss you too. Thanks for chomping in on this live and sharing some of your insights. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. And Tova's saying with the chunky nuchal hand, and that's another thing, like we can't underestimate how much the hand, arm, elbow reality doesn't influence the rotation, because sometimes they can't go one way and they have to go the other way. So then that's a whole nother part of the evaluation that we can't always assess until they come out. Yeah. Right. Darn, like elbows. Elbows are knives. We have a t-shirt about that.
Yeah, that is true.
Only midwives would get that.
Yes. Get that reference.
Yeah.
Midwives and birth workers. Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Got another question for me?
Looking. How old is too old to go back to studying to be a midwife?
That's such a sweet question. Okay, so I have a really real answer here. Okay, I have a really real answer.
It's from Renee.
How late, how old are you happy being up all night? That's it. That's the only determiner.
30.
Yeah, midwifery requires you to be on call and frequently be up from midnight to 5 a.m. And if it's hard to be up during that time, that's the only thing that I would say holds you back. But I will say that practicing midwifery in the trenches, if you will, like the on-call, the daily grind, the nitty-gritty, the answering all the patient calls, is only one way that midwifery can be practiced. I'm also practicing midwifery.
Yeah.
I'm midwifing midwives. There are midwives who teach classes. There are midwives who do research. There are midwives who are investigating this whole policy analyst, insurance reimbursement. There's so many ways that you can contribute to the profession that doesn't involve actually being in the trenches or on the front line.
Absolutely.
Some of us really, we have a commitment to go in there and change the world one birth at a time, but I would really argue that there's a lot of ways to change this system. And it doesn't necessarily mean beating yourself up if that's not a good time in your life, if it doesn't work for you, if you have small kids, or if you're, at a stage in your life where you don't want to be on call 24/7. There's lots of other ways. And if you're interested in some unique schooling options that bring you higher degrees in the field of midwifery, shoot me a message, because I've got some good resources. I've heard on the grapevine some really cool new programs coming out. So, yeah.
Awesome. That's such a good point, though, that, you can be a midwife without being on the ground.
In the trenches, man.
I don't know what the words would
Yeah.
be, but
That's
not
what it
having
feels
to be
like,
up in the trenches. Yes.
It's battle.
In the trenches.
I mean, you're
I
battling
bet.
with nature.
Yeah.
You're battling with medical system. You're battling with your own sleep deprivation. I mean, it's in the trenches.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was good. How are you so energetic?
Somebody actually asked that. That's so funny.
I can't read those.
I'm actually not that energetic. People have this misconstructed. Yeah. I have the right people on my team. I hire the right people, and together we make magic. That's my answer. Yeah, teamwork.
Yeah. Teamwork.
That's right.
You don't have to do it all, right? And that's one of the things that you're always preaching, right?
Work together.
Delegate, right? Like.
That's right.
So you don't have the burnout, so you don't,
That's right.
So you can be more available.
Yep. Exactly.
Emotionally.
Exactly.
Emotional bandwidth. Yes.
I have just started.
And coffee. Do you drink coffee?
A year ago, I was at a birth in Hawaii.
Oh, yeah.
And I had been up all night with the mom. And she finally birthed in the early morning, and we were still in the cleanup phase. And I had been with her the whole day before, so it's been like a 24-hour birth. And it was beautiful and easy and no complaints. But I had been up. I had sent my students to sleep, and I had stayed up all night. And so we were in the cleanup and evaluating the newborn phase and everything. And the dad just put a cup of coffee in my hand, and he's this big Hawaiian guy. He's like, "You need this." And I was like, "I do. You are right." And so I took a sip.
He knew.
He was. I took a sip, and I took another sip, and I've had coffee every day since that birth. Yeah. I know. I was totally hooked right away. Yeah. I hadn't my whole life. I hadn't drank coffee at all, but now I do.
Funny.
My whole life. I know.
Your whole life?
That's why we're friends now. Then, so. Yeah.
That's
but I did births for like 20 years without coffee.
Because of the coffee.
And then just last year, started drinking coffee.
Wow.
Earl Grey was my poison. Earl Grey.
No,
it does. I didn't do births without caffeine. I just didn't do coffee.
That's black tea?
Yeah.
Coffee. Okay. Coffee. Oh, that's funny. All right. Let's see.
Okay. Let's do it.
Do a couple more and then
we
save
keep
the rest
them. It's
for
so
next week. It's awesome. Yeah, and if anybody has questions, you just drop them in there.
Yep.
About anything. Birth, business.
Yeah.
Midwifery.
We got a mama question.
All right, let's see. So, maybe.
Yeah, it's good. I like it when the moms ask questions too.
Mom questions are good too. Yeah. I think that's one of those things with new moms or, whether they're familiar with midwifery or not. It's just being able to have like a safe space where you can ask the question about what happened here, or you're feeling unsure about it. And maybe you didn't have the best fit in terms of care provider. So you don't feel safe asking. Yeah. So,
I love
can ask these questions here too. Like,
love
hey,
to
what
be
do you
a
think
resource
maybe happened here? Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, Tanny. I see Tanny's here. Hey, Tanny. Tanny's from on the east coast of Australia. I do drink coffee now, but I didn't for years. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
This isn't coffee. This is late
thanks
here.
so much
go to
for
bed.
braving the time zone difference. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's quite the difference, right? Between me and Augustine. Augustine's in Australia, and I'm in Illinois. And
13. Yeah, I was going to say 13 time
hours?
zones. Yeah, it's pretty significant.
Yeah,
I'm waking up and you're going to
She's
bed.
waking up.
Well,
and I'm going to go to bed.
It's been fun. I'm so glad we're doing this.
Yeah, I love this. I find it all just fascinating, right? Because I myself am not a midwife, and so it's just, I am like obsessed.
I love it. You're the right advocate for us, I tell you.
But oh my goodness.
Have you guys seen her viral TikTok? We're publishing it soon.
Well, and what's interesting,
so great.
I have a problem with TikTok, but no dancing, but me making some statements. But that's the one thing I think which is tough for midwives, right? Being in it, working in it,
it's really hard.
Dealing with the politics. It's hard to speak out because there's always that threat. So I don't know.
It's awesome. You can be the advocate we all need.
I don't know how.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, there's so many out there, right? That it's just, but it's hard
Yep.
specifically, I
It is
think,
really,
for
really hard. Yep.
midwives
Yep.
to play that role because there's a lot more on the line
Yep.
than somebody like me
Yep.
who's not
Yep.
that. So,
Do you want to do one or two more questions?
well, all right, let's see. Yeah. So, well, one says, how do you become
Yeah,
a
we talked
midwife?
some about.
But
We'll
we
cover
talked
it
about that, right? A
another
little
time.
bit in the
Yeah.
beginning. Yeah. Okay. Energetic. Let's see. Looking here. There's one. Oh, there was somebody asking about struggling with knowing how to enter and categorize things in like QuickBooks. So like the business part of, I know paying a midwife assistant is an expense, but I don't know if I need to make that a journal entry or something different. This is something
It
that you
is,
kind of
yeah.
cover in your midwifery,
Well,
right?
we talk
Like
about
not
record keeping
QuickBooks,
for
but
sure. And my biggest advice, I'm just going to give it to y'all free. My biggest advice is you need to hire a bookkeeper. If you run your own business and you're an independent entrepreneur, you need to have a bookkeeper. It's not a full-time employee. They're an independent contractor. You don't pay any taxes on this person. You just pay them the contracted amount you agree on. And you'll use them more in the beginning as you set up systems. And then as your business matures and you have just systems that you follow, you'll see them maybe 2, maybe 4 hours a month. And you might not even see them. Many of them are doing it online now. So you use online QuickBooks and then they can access remote and you guys can just have a phone conversation.
Right.
But there's many reasons for this. In the same way that a new mama or pregnant person needs a midwife for just some of the guidance. And have you looked here and have you checked this and let me check your belly and have you asked these questions and have you thought about these informed decision making and this is the next step and this is what we'll do next visit. That kind of mentoring through the process is exactly what a bookkeeper does for your business. It's like a midwife for your money. You can quote me on it. So midwives need that. Yeah, I know.
Good.
Midwives need that. And there's bookkeepers in the whole nation, all over. Some of them are certified. Some of them just learned how to balance books. It doesn't really matter. Just find someone that you trust and that you like. And then sit with them and set up the systems. They know where accounts receivable should be recorded. They know all the categories for accounts payable. They're going to be the ones that set up the system so that you can pay payroll or pay your bills or pay yourself a salary, where it all gets tracked, how it gets tracked. That's their expertise. So don't try to learn this, just hire an expert. And the great thing is that bookkeepers are very affordable. We're talking $20 to $40 an hour. So you can't go wrong. Everyone can afford, less than $100 a month to have an expert help you create the systems.
Right. Well, and just to even think of, okay, well, if you hire somebody, right, to help you with your books, then everything is laid out and ready for tax time, and you just don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about
and you don't have
getting
to
in
learn
trouble for
anything
doing it
else.
wrong,
Let's say we don't
and,
need
like,
71
all that stuff.
professions.
So it's just
you don't need to learn bookkeeping.
Yeah. Well, and like you say, right? Right. And like you say, stay in your genius zone. Where are you? You have more bandwidth to be a really awesome midwife and not have to become an accountant on top of it.
One of my favorite things that I learned as a new entrepreneur was that a strength is what makes you feel strong, and a weakness is what makes you feel weak. And really, all of us in work, life, love should be living in the place that makes us feel strong. That's what we should be doing more of every day. And we should definitely delegate or share or hire or somehow get the stuff that needs to get done that doesn't make us feel strong done by others. And for most midwives, bookkeeping is not a strength. So don't try to do it. It does not serve you to try to do things you don't love. You love midwifery, do midwifery. Hire people to help you do the rest. And bookkeeping is one of those things that I'm not even going to tell you how to do it because you don't need to know how to do it. You just need to hire someone who does.
Right. Yeah. And like you mentioned, right, the 25 to $40 an hour, but the thing is something that could
Exactly.
take you
And your time
7 hours
is
to
so
do could
much
take
more
them
valuable than that.
30
And your
minutes to an
money
hour.
is going to go so much further hiring
Yeah.
that expert guidance where they can just help you understand the terms, set up the
Right.
systems, and then it's kind of a plug and play process. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you can spend that
Or
extra time, right,
or
serving your clients
self-care,
and finding new clients
taking care
rather
of
than doing
yourself.
bookkeeping. Or
It
that,
so
which
is.
that's part of running a
Yeah.
business too, is taking care of
Yeah.
yourself.
Totally.
It's super important. Yeah.
So let's see. I'm just going to
Oh
catch
my
up with
goodness.
the chat
All
we have
right.
going on here. Kylie is asking,
Mm-hmm.
with the upcoming programs you mentioned, are those CPM or CNM? I know about both. So message me if you're interested. I know some really interesting programs in both. And some of them not even midwifery related, but more like research, advocacy, policy analyst, that kind of thing. So midwife Audrey is saying, thank you both for doing this. I just happened across this. We're so glad you found us. Crystal's asking, are there any tips for drawing more conversation out of really quiet and shy clients, the kind that are pleasant enough, but give brief yes or no responses, but don't ask a lot of their own questions? Crystal, that's a great question, actually. Because personality differences in midwifery is like one of the most like nuanced and fascinating conversations, because you are getting to know someone on the most intimate level possible. I mean, you are in their home, oftentimes in their body, in their relationships, at the very core of their being, in one of the most transformational and profound moments of their lives. Like, it is a major relationship. And how it's done is so important because it changes everything, right? So, yeah, for those really quiet clients, I have a couple of questions for you. Number one is, consider the possibility that you're not the right midwife. And I don't mean this in any kind of judgmental way. It's just like a thing. Like, there's a right midwife for everyone. And some of us are not right for some people. And sometimes the client is not able to verbalize that. So if you become aware of the awkwardness or the tension or the lack of connection, it's okay to say that. It's okay to say, I feel like we don't have a lot of rapport. And I'm wondering, am I the right midwife for you? Would it help you if I gave you referrals where there's other people? Or would it be helpful for you to know that it's totally okay for you to choose whoever you want to be with, even late in the game? It's okay for you to leave if it's not working for you. And sometimes with that response, you get like quiet, even more quiet, like, okay. And then they leave and you gave them permission to leave. Or sometimes you get, no, I love you. This is great. And you're like, oh, I had no idea. That's good. But then you can learn some more subtle signals from that person, that is that they're not demonstrative, they're not very large with their feelings, but you can be like, tell me what's great about it for you, how is this working for you, because I'm not getting those signals. And then they can respond that way. The other thing about quiet clients is sometimes it's indicative of a bigger problem. And again, I don't mean this in any kind of judgmental way. This is just from that, critical thinking pathway of like what's going on. And sometimes there's a bigger issue than you have identified. So there's silence, there's shutdown, there's quiet. So maybe there's abuse in the home, or maybe there's a history of trauma, or maybe there is financial difficulties, or the list could go on and on. So whenever you get someone that is really not engaging, I would say that is a yellow flag, and that's a reason to really investigate, because as we all know, in labor everything is dialed up, and the prenatal time is the time to explore what's going on. It's the time to have hard conversations. It's the time to ask what if questions. And it's very reasonable to say to a mom, I don't actually know how you're feeling. And so when you're in labor, I won't know how to take care of you. What's going on for you? It's okay to say that, even though it might like make someone blush or make someone cry or make them uncomfortable. Prenatal time is the time to do that. If you wait till labor, that's when you have explosive situations that are actually can be quite dangerous for the mom and for the midwife. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so important. And like you had said, right? Giving them permission to be like, it's okay to like find somebody else, because you as a midwife, I would imagine, would not want to be in a situation where you were not the good fit and you didn't find out until you were in it, where there was no other option. And then, you know, specifically right with the defensive charting and all that too, you know, if there's weird feelings towards you as a person.
I'm just thinking back to some of the really quiet clients that I've had. And I guess the only other thing I would say that I've become aware of is sometimes, and Crystal, I certainly don't mean this aimed at you in any way, but sometimes the environment that you personally create in your clinic space, whether it's a traveling clinic with a prenatal bag in their home, or whether it's a big office clinic in some medical practice, the space that you create, for whatever reason, triggers in that person a child archetype. So if you've ever done any research in archetypes, we all have all the layers of all the ages we've ever been inside of us at all times. And most of the time, as mentally healthy, mature adult humans, we get to walk through the world in our adult brain. But sometimes triggering experiences make us assume the archetype of a younger self. And when we're in that archetype of our younger self, we don't respond, engage, or communicate from an adult brain. We're doing it from a child brain. So I don't know if this is true, but I've seen this a few times where I've had a really non-participatory client, and upon investigation with some of these difficult conversations, it becomes clear that either they're conscious of their child archetype brain taking over, or they're not conscious. And if they're not conscious of that child archetype brain taking over, they're really not safe for a home birth. And this is controversial, but you know, I really know this to be true. Children don't do a great job of giving birth. If any of you have ever worked in, you know, crisis areas, or, you know, with teenagers who are having babies, unless they're very prepared for what they're about to go through, which means actually they're not in their child brain, they don't do a great job. They either completely disconnect from their body. This is where the teenagers give birth in the prom bathroom, or they are hysterical, unable to cope. And that is not a great scenario. Either scenario is not great for a community-based birth. We help folks who are fully informed of their decision and are consciously choosing their sovereign right to but children can't do that. So if you discover that they're unconsciously in their child archetype because of triggered for whatever reason, you either need to work through that trauma if you have enough time in the pregnancy, or you actually need to risk them out. If they come to you and they say, yeah, I feel shut down, and you explore that, and they say, well, yeah, that I had some really scary things happen when I was a kid, and I feel like I don't quite have my voice, and I something's up, then you have a really amazing opportunity for healing. And you can help them reclaim their adult thinking brain by virtue of the way midwifery care is, which is with tea and quiet voices and privacy and an hour-long appointment on the couch, and the opportunity to go into histories of trauma and to involve their partner in their healing and to empower them to be at the core of all decision making. It can change everything, but it has to be brought to light. You have to facilitate that change. It very, very rarely happens independently. Because, you know that old saying, our culture kind of grew up with that saying, children are to be seen and not heard. Do you remember that saying? That is pervasively in our culture. And so if they aren't heard, they won't be able to make that shift. And so you are the one that says, I see something and I'm inviting you to share. I want to hear what you have to say. That changes everything. That breaks the archetype of the child archetype, because they're not silenced anymore. And of course, the patriarchal medical model that we all are participating in functions this way, right? Sit in the waiting room, don't talk. Go to an exam room, sit on a paper, don't talk. we'll examine your belly. We'll tell you when your next appointment is.
Ask for
Out you go.
permission,
It's a
all that,
child archetype model. They're treating adult
Mm-hmm.
women like children. And so
Yeah.
many of them, when they go back into that medical model,
Mm-hmm.
the patriarchy of whatever, and if they have an abuse history or a dominant father or things like that, they oftentimes cannot find their modern adult brain. And in fact, we see this oftentimes in labor. If you know, for birth workers that attend hospital births, sometimes you'll see a woman go meek and mild and silent and agree to everything that's suggested. And you're like, what is going on? And then afterwards, she'll even sometimes express like, I don't know why I didn't say no. I don't know why I didn't fight for myself. It's because you can't when you're in child brain. You're in survival place of like this child archetype that is just trying to find a way through.
Yeah.
So if you discover that someone is disengaged, shut down, meek and mild, not participatory in their care, that's one possibility, is that they have been triggered into a child brain. And to figure out what that trigger is, maybe it's you taking their blood pressure. Maybe that just puts them in this place. Or maybe it's even going to a medical office in the first place. Or maybe you started asking questions about something that's, I mean, you never know. But the risk assessment piece for the midwife is this person conscious or not of this personality shift or of this lack of engagement? Right. And then, of course, there's the possibility that we come across people that are always in their child brain, that they are in a state of constant flight or fight or, you know, whatever. And that's not appropriate for out of hospital birth either. Because when we talk about defensive charting, and those of you who've taken my class know, this is when we talk about alert and oriented to person, time, place, and situation. This is not oriented to situation. They don't know what they're choosing if they can't actually engage in the choice. And if they're not alert and oriented times 4, they're really not appropriate for community-based birth. But that's sort of advanced midwifery there.
Yeah.
It's a great
but that's
question.
important to know, right? Because headspace is vitally
Thank you so much, Crystal.
During labor. Yeah.
All righty.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? Do we do it today?
All right.
We have one more?
I think we did it. Let me see if there's one more, but that might be
We did it.
Pretty solid for today. And then, of course, we'll have more questions next week. Let me take a quick look.
We had got some.
Oh, just that we have one more call for the Start of Midwifery business, right? On the 17th. So that course is still available for sign up.
It'll be available for sign up indefinitely. For anyone that's ready to start a practice, it's up there. You can do it at your own pace. It's available at any time. But for those of you that would like to get in on the live call with me, helping to explain some of the details, answer any personal questions you have about your own practice setup, business setup, join me on that call on the 17th.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an awesome resource.
Yeah, it's fun.
You know.
That's right.
Get it started right.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Well, I think that's pretty much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate
talking to you,
your facilitation and your great questions today. And we'll see everyone on the flip side. And if you want to catch the recording of this, go subscribe to my YouTube channel. And it's Augustine Colebrook. All righty. Thanks, Kristen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Bye, friends.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, Christine.
Okay.
Have a good day.
Night.